Welcome to Ordnance Wargaming. Today I'm going to be talking about how to create an effective list in Warhammer 40k. Okay guys, so if you're brand new to 40k, this is a great place to start. So obviously the first thing you need to choose when you're determining what you're going to be playing is you need to choose a faction. I chose Necrons as my first faction because I loved the way that they looked. I didn't really know much of the lore other than they were undead robots in space, which I thought was pretty cool. And they looked fantastic, and everyone else that I had to play against was playing Space Marines, except there was probably one guy that was playing Imperial Guard, but I was the only one that really played Xenos, which I really liked because it meant that it always made the battles, for me, really interesting, because I wasn't fighting someone that I probably should be allied with. I was fighting the enemy, the living people I wanted to kill, which made it really fun. But I chose it because of the aesthetic style. Another good reason for picking an army is because of the lore, or the big one, your friend's getting rid of one of their armies and it became available at a cheap price. That's another really good reason to pick one faction over another. Apart from that, there are not really any good reasons, because, I mean, you could pick what's the most powerful codex at the time, but codexes get updated and it changes. And in my opinion, I don't really think that any army is more powerful than the other. They all have their strengths and weaknesses. If an army is not powerful, it's because you're playing it wrong, basically. I had a really old codex for a long time that wasn't updated, and I was still winning a decent number of games. I'd lose some, spectacularly yes, but I was fighting armies that their codex was optimized for the rule set and mine wasn't, and I was still able to pull off a victory. And even that was when I was a teenager and not the most tactically minded, I'll let you know. So that's choosing a faction. Okay, so the next step of setting up your list to be as effective as you can possibly make it is to agree on a number of points with your opponents. I usually play 1,500 to 2,000 points. It's a reasonable sized game. It doesn't get too out of hand, but it allows for enough variety. So once you've agreed on your number of points with your opponent, you need to pick what kind of list you're going to take. Are you going to take an unbound list and just throw random crapper 10 flyers at your opponent and piss them off to no end because that's a right dick move to do? Or are you going to take a battle-forged army that's a bit more structured and consists of detachments that will give you a nice theme to your army and allow you to balance it out nicely? Clearly there's pros and cons to each option. The big pros that I found with the unbound, because I've played a few games unbound and I didn't personally enjoy it that much just because it felt really one-sided, and which side got the advantage felt really random because you had no idea what your opponent was going to take. They didn't know what you were going to take, so there's no way to make sure that you'd have stuff to counter. So obviously the big pros is you've got no restrictions, so you can field a really cheesy army with 10 flyers and 3 monoliths if you wanted to. The other big pros are that it gives you the ability to try more unconventional lists that are not seen all the time. Try something a bit different. And obviously you can get some interesting scenarios, because you could set up a scenario where, say, your opponent does just have flyers and you have to defend yourself for so many turns from them. Could be an interesting scenario. Obviously the big con of Unbound is you don't get command benefits, which, if you've read the rulebook, you know that if you put these restrictions on your army, you get this benefit, which at no point costs, so it's a great way to make your army a bit more powerful without having to spend any more points. And if you're fielding Battleforge and your opponent's fielding an Unbound, could give you a significant advantage. Or if your opponent's fielding detachments that have different rules to yours, it could give you an advantage or a disadvantage, depending on how clever you are with choosing which detachments you want to take. Unbound, in my opinion, is a bit of a double-edged sword, because while you're unpredictable, your opponent is also incredibly unpredictable with what they're going to take, which means setting up a list that will be able to effectively answer what your opponent brings is quite challenging. The other thing is that there's little to no point in balancing your list out, because say you balance your list out to be able to handle any scenario you came across. You're a jack of all trades and a master of nothing. So if your opponent takes one thing and focuses very tightly on, say, flyers, but you have a lot of weapons that can take out, say, you have a couple that can take out air, a couple that can take out troops, some that can take out tanks, you're not going to be able to do it as effectively, because you're effectively fighting your opponent's entire army with only a small fraction of yours, because most of it can't effectively counter what your opponent has brung. So that's something you need to be careful of when writing an unbound list. Okay, so now, you've decided to take a battle-forged army. Are you going to take a combined arms detachment, some codex detachments? What are you going to take? My general advice would be to take as many detachments as you can fit in with the models you want to take. Say you were, for example, taking some troops, a HQ, then you take it in a combined arms, because it gives you the advantage of your troops having objectives secured, and there's no point in then taking, say, the models for an Annihilation Nexus in your combined arms. Split them off and take them in the Annihilation Nexus, because it means that they then get a buff. If you can give a buff to with your command benefits to as many models in your army as possible, it's going to make it that much more effective and that much more deadly. When you're writing your list, you also want to make sure that all the essential roles in your army are filled. So you need to have some troops, you need to have a HQ, you need to have some fast attack and some elites and some heavy support, because while some people think that these are arbitrary names, Games Workshop's actually been really clever in the naming, because it's really descriptive of what those things do. Your HQ leads your army and gives buffs to lots of stuff. Your troops are there to make up the bulk and have troops marching across the table to take objectives. Your fast attack, it's mostly fast, and it can move up and throw your opponent into the death throes early on if you play it right. Your heavy support lays down fire so that your opponent can't move as effectively. I mean, all of these roles play very specific things, and you need to make sure that these things are met. So the next thing that you need to do is you need to make sure that each unit has a task. You need to make sure that you're not taking anything, you're just like, oh, I'll work out what it does on the table. Like, with the models I've got out here, the Annihilation Nexus over here, its purpose is to stop my opponent from moving and make them try to be in cover. And it's really effective it's a really effective strategy against armies that have lots of models, because if you're playing orcs and they're coming up here, they either have to go right around, in which case they're exposed, or if they try to move through the cover, then they're going to move slower. Which, obviously, if you can keep orcs at bay and make them move across the table slower, it gives you more turns to shoot at them. Or, for example, my heavy destroyers. Their objective is to find things that are hard and don't have a lot of models, and just take those things out. Or destroyers, they're meant to take out heavy infantry. Everything in my lists always has a very specific purpose, and it sticks to that purpose. It may not always make its point back, but as long as it does what my objective for it was, it's done its job. And I'll make up the points that it didn't kill elsewhere. You need to prioritize each task. So if you're playing a mission where there's objectives, you probably want to put a few more points into your troops, because you need to be able to go take and hold objectives. So you don't want to take bare minimum troops in that scenario, because it puts you at a disadvantage. And if you can, try to split your squads into smaller squads if you just don't have the models. Say, I have 10 Immortals over here behind this Ghost Arc that you can't see, but they're there. See, they're there. And if I split them into 2 squads of 5, I can hold 2 objectives with them, which does give me an advantage, because it means I can be in more than one place at once. Generally speaking, I try to take smaller squads, but take more of them, because it just leads to more flexibility. I can handle more of what my opponent throws at me better. finally, like I have said earlier, when you're writing your list, you'll want to write it in a way, sorry, I'm just trying to think for a moment, write it in a way that you make sure that as many models in your army benefit from your command benefits. So like I said, if you're going to be taking a Doomsday Ark into Annihilation barges, put them into their specific detachment because it gives them an advantage. Or if you're going to be taking a whole bunch of destroyers and a destroyer lord, put them into a destroyer cult detachment. Or here I have a Canoptech Harvest. If you're going to be taking these models, put them into their detachment because they're not going to benefit from objectives secured. So why would you put them in a combined arms if you can put them in a detachment where they could potentially, in the case of the Canoptech Harvest, they could be getting reanimation protocols and being made to last longer, which is obviously a huge benefit. So that's the basics of choosing what kind of detachments you're going to take. Next week I'm going to go into more detail of the different types of units that you can take. I'll discuss the difference between HQ, troop, elites, fast attack and heavy support, and how their battlefield roles work so that you can write a more effective list. So yes, this is going to be a 2-part video effectively. So just how to end this, I suppose. Oh, I know. Don't forget to rate, comment and subscribe. Until next time, enjoy your wargaming.